Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 165 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp.
Yeah, but maybe that's just because neither one of us knows how to play the harp.
Well, that's true. I'm not sure either one of us knows how to use a bowstring, though.
Not well, no.
Yeah, I mean...
Probably a lot less dangerous with a harp, actually.
That's probably true. Not going to hurt anybody with that.
Exactly. Just your ears. But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who will come never again to the hill of Cerin Amroth as living man, Alan Sisto.
But maybe as a zombie. You never know.
You've been spending way too much time with me, and for that, I feel like I need to apologize to your family.
Apology accepted.
But that is an oddly appropriate segue into today's philology fair. All right. Well, in today's episode, Haldir brings the fellowship to Cerin Amroth, where ever bloom the winter flowers in the unfading grass. And although there are two flowers named in that scene, and we're going to be talking about both of them, I want to spend a little extra time today on the name of one of those flowers, and that is Eleanor.
I'm glad to hear that. That's a word that I'm always interested in.
I know it is. I know it is. And it's one of those Elvish words that we hear so much, and it's so easy to say, that it all sort of runs together. You may not even really think about what that word means. But if you stop and look at it, you might realize that it is actually made up of two pretty common and very familiar Sindarin words. El, meaning star, and Anor, meaning sun.
Oh, yeah.
And that's pretty much exactly how it's translated in...
Oh, no. Parma El de Lambron, 17.
Am I getting predictable in my old age?
Well... Yes, on both counts, both predictable and old age, yes.
Definitely getting old and possibly predictable as well. Yes, of course it is in Parma El de Lambron number 17, because remember, that's Tolkien's own words. That's his essay or glossary. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's a collection of papers called Words, Phrases, and Passages in The Lord of the Rings. And in it, Tolkien translates Eleanor as sun star.
Now, this is a purely fictitious flower. It's not an Elvish name for a flower that we have in the real world.
Right.
As we'll discuss later on in letter number 312 to Amy Ronald, written in November of 1969, Tolkien suggested that Eleanor might be akin to, quote, a pimpernel, perhaps a little enlarged, growing sun-golden flowers and star-silver ones on the same plant, and sometimes the two combined. Well, with a description like that, you can understand why he calls the flower a sun star.
Absolutely. It's a very descriptive name. And of course, it's not just the name of a flower. As we'll see in a few years, I guess, when we get to the end of the book, on March 25th, year 1421 of the Shire Reckoning, Sam and Rosie's first daughter is born, and she, of course, is named Eleanor.
That she
now,
is.
This is a particularly symbolic name for Sam to give to his daughter, because as we know, hobbits do tend to name their baby girls after flowers or jewels. I think that's said in Appendix F.
I think
but
so.
Sam, having gone on this adventure and having come back as an elf friend, he's coming back enchanted by all these experiences. And he's kind of risen above the level of choosing just any old ordinary flower name. And so that's why he chooses an Elvish flower name for a flower that is actually associated with fairy. It's associated with the elves. So naming his daughter Eleanor after this very magical flower is both traditional and also completely original.
That's right. Now, we actually see Sam's thought process in the last chapter of the book. I'm going to go ahead and read it now. It's a longish passage, but it'll illustrate exactly how Sam, with Frodo's help, comes to this name as both a nod to Hobbit tradition and also a name that's beautiful enough for his daughter. Well, Mr. Frodo, he said, I'm in a bit of a fix. Rose and me had settled to call him Frodo, with your leave. But it's not him, it's her. Though as pretty a maid child as anyone could hope for. Taken after Rose more than me, luckily, so we don't know what to do. Well, Sam, said Frodo, what's wrong with the old customs? Choose a flower name like Rose. Half the maid children in the Shire are called by such names, and what could be better? I suppose you're right, Mr. Frodo. I've heard some beautiful names on my travels, but I suppose they're a bit too grand for daily wear and tear, as you might say. The gaffer, he says, make it short, and then you won't have to cut it short before you can use it. But if it's to be a flower name, then I don't trouble about the length. It must be a beautiful flower, because you see, I think she's very beautiful, and is going to be beautifuler still. Frodo thought for a moment. Well, Sam, what about Eleanor, the sun star? You remember the little golden flower in the grass of Lothlórien? You're right again, Mr. Frodo, said Sam, delighted. That's what I wanted.
I bet you have that passage memorized.
Maybe not the whole thing, but I do have that bit about being beautiful or still down for obvious reasons.
I bet, yeah. Well, so of course, for exactly that reason, Sam does name his daughter Eleanor, and I have come across a few Tolkien fans who named their baby girls Eleanor. It is a really nice kind of stealthy Tolkien-inspired name because obviously it's, because it's just an altered spelling of what sounds like an actual real-world woman's name, Eleanor.
Yeah, you're right. I love how you said you've come across a few Tolkien fans who named their baby girls Eleanor.
Just a few.
One of them happens to be your co-host. I mean,
I know. I just don't want to name names. I want to give you a chance to put that out there again.
Well, as I've mentioned on the show several times, my daughter was named after the flower, and really after Sam's daughter, I suppose, because it is a great way to give a child a Tolkien-inspired name without dooming them to a life of being teased at school. Come here, worm tongue.
So I shouldn't name my son Tin Fang Warble? Is that what you're telling me?
Tin Fang Warble. No, and I'm not going to name my son Ale. I just think that's really just wrong.
No.
Or Feanor, for that matter.
I have a feeling that middle schoolers and high schoolers would find a way to make fun of the name Ale.
I think they would. I think we can leave that there, but I think they would.
I think they would figure it out.
I think fourth graders would be able to make fun of Ale.
Yeah, I think my first grader would probably figure something out.
Probably.
Yeah, but as you said, it's a real world name. It's Eleanor.
Yeah, it's stealthy, like you said. I love that.
Yeah. And obviously the meaning of the real world name Eleanor is not Sunstar.
Well, no.
To be honest, the real etymology of that name is not entirely clear. I actually did look it up.
You did? You didn't know it off the top of your head?
I didn't
Just
know
kidding.
it off the top of my head. No, I did look it up. I read some sources that suggested a Greek or a Hebrew origin, but they don't seem all that convincing to me or to actual linguists. So it doesn't really seem to be one of those, but you might find that on some of the baby naming sites. Don't buy it. The most convincing explanation is that it probably comes from a medieval Provençal French name, which is Aliénor. Okay. Now, this makes a lot of sense because the name first became popular in the Middle Ages, and it was mostly popular among noble women in Western Europe. And obviously the first one that probably comes to mind for anybody who knows about medieval history is Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Yeah.
And she was actually from a Provençal speaking region of France. Mm-hmm. Now, Eleanor of Aquitaine was Queen of France and then Queen of England. She was married twice, first to King Louis VII.
Quite a career, really.
Quite a career.
Yeah.
King Louis VII of France was her first husband, and then Henry, Duke of Normandy, who became King Henry II of England.
That's right.
If you know your history, she's the mother of Richard the Lionheart and King John of Magna Carta fame. Really huge, towering woman in history. I mean, just go watch the movie The Lion in Winter. That movie has more great British actors in it than a Harry Potter movie.
Boy, it sure does. I have to admit, though, it's been a long time since I've seen it. I do remember, though, doing a DI. That's a dramatic interp. And it was basically like the readings we do on the show. You know, it's you do have the text in front of you, so it's not memorized. And you're not doing it as a radio drama, but you do it with a partner. And I remember in one of my speech classes, I think I actually did a class. It was like solo and duo interps.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun. I got to be Henry, and one of my classmates was Eleanor. But
cool.
That was like a lifetime ago. So I have to say, I don't recall anything more than the fact that I did it and had a lot of fun. It was a great script.
Yeah. So you were Peter O'Toole, basically. That's pretty cool.
Yes, I was.
I mean, no pressure.
None at all. The good news is most of my classmates probably didn't realize that.
Probably not, yeah. Well, the reason I bring up Eleanor of Aquitaine is because there is some confusion as to whether she might have actually been the first person to be named Eleanor, and this ties directly into the possible etymology of the name. See, her mother's name was Ainor, which is an old Germanic women's name that was pretty common in medieval France. And the most convincing etymology for the name Eleanor, which was Aliénor, in French, or in Provençal French, is that she was actually named Ainor after her mother, but everybody called her the other Ainor, which in Latin would be Alia Ainor, which just sort of flowed together as Aliénor.
Wow. That's interesting.
Isn't that kind of cool? I mean, who wants to go through life as, the other one?
The other.
But I guess if her mother was an amazing woman too, then, why not?
Right.
Now, The reason it's a little unclear is because there are a couple of lesser-known Eleanors in history before Eleanor of Aquitaine, but
Oh.
it seems like they weren't actually written about until after her. So some scholars believe that maybe Eleanor of Aquitaine, because she was like basically the most
Mm.
powerful woman of her time,
Oh, yeah.
she was so popular that her name, Eleanor, basically replaced the previous name Aenor. And so women who had been called Aenor in history before her actually ended up being called Eleanor in later histories. It's fascinating
Oh,
stuff.
well, that is.
Yeah. So a little bit of a digression there, but that's the sort of the real world history of the name.
Yeah.
But if we can bring this back to Tolkien here,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that by having the legendary hero Samwise Gamgee name his daughter Eleanor and give it this Elvish etymology, Tolkien is kind of giving us an alternate version here. He's giving us another
Mm-hmm.
reason for the name being so popular. It's
Yeah,
another one
yeah.
of those asterisk realities that Tom Shippey
Right.
talks about, this sort of forgotten mythical origin of something that's really common in our world.
Right.
And I can't help thinking that maybe Tolkien chose to asterisk this name because maybe he knew it had unclear origins. You know, it's like,
Maybe.
well, scholars can't figure out exactly where the name Eleanor came from. I'll just make up a story for it. And if that was his rationale, I think that's really cool.
That really is. And maybe so. There don't seem to be any significant women in Tolkien's life named Eleanor that would give him a reason to be interested in the name.
That's what I thought too, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if he'd had Sam name his daughter Edith or Mabel, I guess we could point to a pretty clear inspiration.
Right,
That'd
exactly.
be a little
yeah.
on the nose for Tolkien. Let's just be
Quite,
clear.
yeah.
He's a little more subtle than that.
Yeah,
There don't really seem to be any major Eleanors in his life, so maybe his interest in the name was purely philological.
maybe so. And if so, I can see it because it is a fascinating name.
It is.
But enough about all that. Let's actually go see some of these Eleanor flowers, why don't we?
I think we should. And for that, we need to get back to the book. But that's great because we love the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
We certainly do. We bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for the show every week. Now, if you want to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com. There we have links to every book we've mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other great stuff on the website, too. We've got show notes up there, book links specific to each episode, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and even some other little extras. You'll also find a link to our online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP. There you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other really cool PPP gear. So go check that out.
And now let's join the company as they actually behold the Ninth of Lórien, without blindfolds eventually. And
that's
for
the hope.
that, yeah, well, can't really behold the Ninth if
No.
you're still beholding your blindfold.
You can hear it. It sounds gorgeous.
The day has ended. Behold, the Ninth has come. Sorry. Anyway. Well, I'm going to have you start before I try finding more Ninth puns. You're going to pick up exactly where we left off the last time.
Did we do Knights in White Satin last time? I can't remember.
No, we didn't. Knights in white satin. That would. I wonder if the blindfolds are white satin.
They probably
that
are.
would be
yeah.
That would be perfect because
That's
then
what that song is about. That's what the Moody Blues are about.
That is exactly
know.
right.
It's actually Knights and White Satin. We are such geeks.
Oh my goodness, that's awful. It's wonderfully awful, but yeah. Knights in white satin.
Never reaching the end.
Never reaching Galathon.
Yeah, there you go.
That is good stuff. All right. Pick up before I make it worse, please.
All right. Alas for the folly of these days, said Legolas. Here all are enemies of the one enemy, and yet I must walk blind while the sun is merry in the woodland under leaves of gold. Folly it may seem, said Haldir. Indeed in nothing is the power of the Dark Lord more clearly shown than in the estrangement that divides all those who still oppose him. Yet so little faith and trust do we find now in the world beyond Lothlórien, unless maybe in Rivendell, that we dare not by our own trust endanger our land. We live now upon an island amid many perils, and our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp. The rivers long defended us, but they are a sure guard no more, for the shadow has crept northward all about us. Some speak of departing, yet for that it already seems too late. The mountains to the west are growing evil. To the east the lands are waste and full of Sauron's creatures, and it is rumored that we cannot now safely pass southward through Rohan, and the mouths of the great river are watched by the enemy. Even if we could come to the shores of the sea, we should find no longer any shelter there.
Well, maybe if you hadn't assumed all the dwarves were evil, they might have been able to help you out a little bit. I don't know.
Maybe you'd be a little nicer to people, and
Maybe
they'll let you through.
Maybe this whole thing about not trusting anybody except for maybe in Rivendell. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
If you only trust people who are like on the other side of the mountains in that one other little isolated place, of course the world.
Who are otherwise just like you, really. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. A little better educated. They got more lore there.
Right. Now, he does show some wisdom here, though. He does acknowledge that this is where the power of Sauron really shows itself. And I want to linger on that for a bit. We've talked about the power of Sauron and the evil that kind of emanates from Barad-dûr and from Mordor. But really, this is one of the biggest areas that his power shows itself. And that is the
it is
division
absolutely
of his
true.
troops.
And it is absolutely true that one of the greatest powers that Sauron has is keeping people separated. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is extremely frustrating to me to read Haldir saying this after being completely racist towards the dwarf.
I know,
because
exactly.
He's not. It's like he recognizes that this is Sauron's influence, but he still can't rise above it. And
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's just human nature or elf nature. I don't know, but it's very frustrating. But I do give him credit for recognizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
just like I recognize, and just like I want to give credit to Legolas for pretty quickly. It's been a week since we talked about this, but just a moment ago in this chapter, he was whining about having to wear the blindfold himself.
Mm-hmm.
Here he's moving on from whining about it to just lamenting the folly of these days. Oh, this is
right. It's
not so much a wah thing at this point. It's just, man, this is a shame that this is the world we live in, that we're all enemies of the one enemy, and I don't even get to see this because of that. So
exactly,
Legolas and Haldir are both sort of going in the right direction here in terms of recognizing the division as a tool of evil, but yeah,
not able to go above it, like you said,
unable to rise above it, and I guess it is just sort of the world they live in.
You got to wonder if Gandalf had made it, would he have been able to help them rise? I mean, the reason I go there is because what is Gandalf's job? Well, what was actually the job of all the Astari, but Gandalf's the only one who bothered doing his job. What was the Astari's job in terms of fighting Sauron? It's not to take him on one-on-one in combat. It's to inspire the rest of his foes and bring them together and unite them in opposition to Sauron. So he, of course, knows that this is where the power of Sauron reveals itself. And this is where he has his special powers. This is where he has his strength, is in unifying. And you have to wonder, might he have been able to get Haldir over that hump, so to speak, to realize that you're right. This is where the power of Sauron shows itself. So how about we not give in to the power of Sauron?
Yeah.
I mean, he would have said it with more wit and charm and humor.
Sure, of course. But you're right. I mean, it is, I'm thinking about, what he says when he comes to Theoden in the next book. And it's very much about inspiring to sort of rise above the weakness and the trickery and everything that the Dark Lords of, and I say the Dark Lords, sort of Sauron and Saruman, that they're kind of putting out there in the world. And so, I think that's a really good point. Maybe Gandalf would have been able to do something.
I don't know. It's just one of those speculations. I mean, obviously we'll never know, but it sure does seem like that's the exact thing that he was tailor-made to do.
Yeah, it does.
But
as it stands, I mean, they are going to remain isolated, and I can't help but notice that Haldir referring to Lothlórien as an island amid many perils.
Oh boy,
that just reminds me of Beowulf. That's the circle of light again, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
We are surrounded by the baddies on all sides, and
that's right. And we're ready for combat. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's what. And you hear that, and it's a nice line, and it sounds great. Our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp. But really, let's think about that. What that means is we're having to fight more often than we used to. There's not even time for music anymore.
Yeah,
there's some time, but there's not enough time. Where we would normally be spending our time in music and creativity and art, we're having to spend our time fighting just to defend ourselves. So it is a very different world now. Yeah.
Speaking of music, I can't help but think that the Clash's "Should I Stay or Should I Go Now" is the perfect song for
the next paragraph.
This next bit.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Some speak of departing, but maybe it's too late.
Yeah.
Should I stay or should I go now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe if they just, kind of put that on a playlist, they don't have to play the harp. They've got the Clash.
There you go. I
And
somehow
wasn't
I
the
can't
album
see.
called Combat Rock? I believe it was.
Yes, it was, and I
So.
can't imagine Galadriel being a big fan of the Clash. I don't know why. I just see her as being a little too cultured for that, which is a shame.
Do you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
She's probably more an Enya fan. I'm just kidding.
Probably now. When she was younger, I bet she went through a punk rock phase.
Oh yeah, you bet. But that was more like Sex Pistols and stuff like that.
Probably so. Yeah, it was like
Yeah.
the really like the first wave stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, the original, the OG punk.
Right. Yeah.
There's a blending of metaphors. I never.
That is quite a blending of metaphors. I don't know if
OG
anybody's
punk.
talked about
That doesn't
OG
make
punk.
any sense at all.
No.
Just forget I said that, please.
We're old. We don't even know what the kids are saying.
Thanks for
these days.
reminding me that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kids probably aren't listening to punk either.
No, they're probably writing a dank meme about how old
I
we
think
are.
Green Day is old punk for the kids these days.
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
Anyway, so let's talk about Haldir's
Anything
sort of
else?
breakdown. Anything else except how old we are
Yes,
and how we
please.
don't relate to
Move along.
the hot new music trends of the mid-1970s. So let's break down Haldir's little explanation here, because we actually have had a few listeners write to us to ask, why does Haldir say it's too late? Is it like the Valar aren't going to let them in or something like that? Like, no, it's actually just literally too dangerous to make the journey to the sea.
Too risky.
He talks about how, as for staying is dangerous because the rivers used to defend us,
Right.
but now the shadow has crept northward and all around.
Mm-hmm.
And so as for leaving, what? We can't go west, right?
No, the mountains are evil, so we can't go west.
Right. And then east, the lands are desolate.
Right. And also the wrong way. I mean, I kind of wanted to
That's
point
true.
that out to
You're
him.
not
He
going to
says
find the
that.
sea that way.
You're
yeah.
not going to find, Valinor. You're not going to find the Undying Lands by going to the east.
Right.
You're going the wrong way. No.
Yeah.
And you can't go south because the enemy's watching the mouths of Anduin.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, maybe north, but we don't even really know where the havens are. And that's in the next
That's
passage
right.
that we
Well,
didn't
right.
read.
Yeah, we couldn't read the whole thing, but yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when Mary kind of lets him know, well, I can tell you they're just to the west of my land.
Yeah.
Now, Haldir, you live near the ocean. Tell me of the havens.
Tell me of your home world, Usul.
I love teeing up a good Dune joke for you.
Thank you.
So.
I'm glad you recognized that one. That's a good one.
Yeah. No, it's
I
pretty
thought it
funny though,
was
because Mary's living, lives very close to the Grey Havens. And he says, I can tell you where they are. And Haldir says, yeah, tell me about them. I can't, I've never been there.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know all about
So
that place.
Mary.
Oh no, I
That
have no
is
idea.
so Mary. I love it.
Yeah.
And, I wish we could have read that passage because there's a little bit about, how the hobbits should be very happy because they live near the sea and all of that. But
Isn't that one, there's that one line in there that we're not going to read, but if I had known what the world outside was like, I don't think I should have had the heart to leave it.
yeah,
Isn't
Mary says that.
It's a little sad, isn't it? It's like
I think he's pointing out, I don't think I would have had the courage had I known.
the heart,
Had I
the
known.
courage. I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
you're
it's
right.
so much like, I wouldn't have had the desire. It's just that I wouldn't have had the courage.
I would have
the
been,
guts to
it's
do
a
this.
scary place out here.
It's a terrifying place. We just lost Gandalf. I just saw a demon, an actual
Yeah.
flesh and blood demonic creature. Orcs
Yeah.
are chasing after us. Yeah.
Wasn't
Can't blame
expecting
him.
that when I left the house that morning, that
No, I
September
wasn't.
morning.
I really wasn't. I thought it would just be a nice little jaunt to Rivendell. A couple weeks on the road, we're good to go.
Yeah. But Haldir has some wisdom for him about that. And that's
Yeah.
the part you're going to read, isn't it?
Oh, and I love this. I thank you for, I was going to say I thank you for letting me take this passage, but what I mean by that is thanks for not throwing a hissy fit when I told you I'm going to take this passage.
There's a lot of give and take on the podcast, and
There is. That's true.
we're always pretty good about giving each other the passages we really want. And
That is true.
I'm looking forward to hearing you read this one. So,
All right. Not even to see fair Lothlórien, said Haldir. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places. But still, there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. Some there are among us who sing that the shadow will draw back, and peace shall come again. Yet I do not believe that the world about us will ever again be as it was of old, or the light of the sun as it was aforetime. For the elves, I fear, it will prove at best a truce, in which they may pass to the sea unhindered, and leave the middle earth forever. Alas, for Lothlórien that I love! It would be a poor life in a land where no malorn grew. But if there are malorn trees beyond the great sea, none have reported it. As they spoke thus, the company filed slowly along the paths in the wood, led by Haldir, while the other elf walked behind. They felt the ground beneath their feet smooth and soft, and after a while they walked more freely, without fear of hurt or fall. Being deprived of sight, Frodo found his hearing and other senses sharpened. He could smell the trees and the trodden grass. He could hear many different notes in the rustle of the leaves overhead, the river murmuring away on his right, and the thin, clear voices of birds high in the sky. He felt the sun upon his face and hands when they passed through an open glade. As soon as he set foot upon the far bank of Silverlode, a strange feeling had come upon him, and it deepened as he walked on into the night. It seemed to him that he had stepped over a bridge of time into a corner of the elder days, and was now walking in a world that was no more. In Rivendell there was memory of ancient things. In Lórien, the ancient things still lived on in the waking world. Evil had been seen and heard there. Sorrow had been known. The elves feared and distrusted the world outside. Wolves were howling on the wood's borders. But on the land of Lórien, no shadow lay.
Oh, my
Oh, I
goodness.
love that. Oh, chills.
Such a wonderful
Chills.
passage, and we will talk about that later stuff in just a moment.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, so much.
Let's go back to the beginning of what you read there, and Haldir's really wonderful line about
One of my
just
favorites.
how
Yeah.
the world is. Yes, the world is full of peril, but there is much that is fair. And yes,
Please,
love
just a
is
little more
mingled.
peril. Sorry.
Just a little bit of peril.
I'm going to regret that, but it was, yeah.
No, I think it's spot on actually for this chapter, or for this part of this
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, so there is peril in the world, but there is a lot
Mhm.
that is fair. And
Yeah.
yes, love is mingled with grief, but it just grows greater for that.
And that puts me in
And I
mind of
love that.
Nienna. Now, when we were back in season 1, and I think we actually talked about it more in the Valaquenta when we learned about Nienna and her role in pity and sorrow and all of that,
Mhm.
we were able to
Yeah.
tie that back to the third theme. And here's something that the text of Ainulindale says about the third theme that makes me really think about this line. The theme was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The sorrow is what added the beauty to that.
Mhm.
And just like this, the love grows greater because of the grief.
Because of the grief.
Yeah.
Well, and
Hmm.
it all reminds me of one of my favorite lines from Splintered Light by Verlin Flieger, where she's talking about those antitheses, and she says,
Yes.
"The shadow defines and thereby reveals the light, as the brightness of the light sharpens the shadow."
That's right. They
And
both
it's
hinge
the
upon the
exact
other.
same
Yeah.
thing. It's this idea of recognizing the good by its opposite.
Yep.
And sort of how the opposite makes the good just seem that much greater, and that's really powerful
Boy,
stuff.
That's a
And
very good point. It is. It is very powerful. Very.
and as much as we've been making fun of Haldir,
Rich.
that he has this wonderful moment of wisdom, I think we need to stop and recognize that this is a wise elf here to say
Yeah.
this.
Hey, he's racist, but he is wise. You're right. I mean, no, we have been hard on him. It's true.
We
He
have
deserved
been
it in
hard
many
on
ways.
him. Of course, he's Haldir. Of course, everybody loves
Yeah.
Haldir.
We do love
But-
Haldir.
But he did come across as pretty racist in the last episode.
Have an eye
but
on that dwarf.
it'll get better in this one in just a bit, if we ever get there.
It will. It will get better. You're right.
And then he starts to kind of speculate a little bit about what the future may hold.
Yeah.
Sort of acknowledging his own uncertainty.
That's right. I mean, he talks about how some sing that the shadow's going to draw back and we're going to have peace again, but he doesn't believe it's ever going to be the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that theme of decline we talk about sometimes, that
Mhm.
even if things turn out well, it'll never be the same as it was.
No.
At best it'll be a truce allowing us to leave Middle-earth forever. And
Which is a sad thing for him. Yeah.
it is, absolutely. He doesn't want to leave Lothlórien. He actually says no Malorns would make him sad. Although,
Yeah.
didn't we determine a couple of episodes ago that they actually had Malorn trees in Tolleresia at some point?
In Tolleresia, that's correct. I don't
Yeah.
recall exactly where we found that out.
I think it was one of the passages about Numenor that
Right.
said that they were almost as tall as they had been in Tolleresia.
In Tolleresia.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
He mentions that nobody came back to report it, but really because once they got there, not very many of them are going to come back.
Because they got Malorn trees there.
Right. Why are they going to leave?
Hang out, you know?
Glorfindel came back, but I'm sure he's not going to bother with, with Haldir.
No, I'm not sure.
Let alone giving a report on the flora and fauna of Aman. That's just... He's got stuff to do.
He's got things to do.
He's got Balrogs to throw off.
Sure.
Got...
Let me drop everything and write a detailed account of the flora and fauna of Tolleresia for this March Warden of the Galadriel. Sure.
Right.
That I've probably never even met.
Right. He's not even a Noldor. Why would I do this? Well, now we switch to the company's view, but as usual, it's specifically Frodo's. So they're filing along the path. They've been feeling the ground carefully, but now they feel like they can increase their pace. It feels safe now. The ground is smooth and soft, and they're able to go, at a clip.
Yeah. And then we get this wonderfully sensory passage, despite the fact that there is absolutely no visual input here, because Frodo's blindfolded. But again, we've seen a few times recently where Frodo's senses seem to be sharpened. And we see that again here. We get the smell of the trees and the grass. We hear notes in the rustle of the leaves. We hear the river, the birds. He actually feels the sun on his face and hands, which is that's one of those descriptions that you feel the sun when you read that.
Yeah, you really do. You get that warmth in your face because you can really identify with that. Oh, yeah,
it really brings you in.
It does. It really does. And it also reminds me, it might not have reminded me had we not discussed Nienna and the third theme, but it makes me think of the Valar, of all of the Ainur, before Ilúvatar spoke Ea, before he spoke the world into existence. There was the music. Because it wasn't even a vision. Then he gave them vision.
It was just sound. That's right. And it was just
sound.
Yeah.
He gave them vision. And so in a way, their first experiences were all just auditory, hearing the notes. So
that's really interesting. And I want to come back to that in a moment.
I know, I'm not quite sure how to link that up, but I really do like it.
I have some thoughts, and I want to come back to that in a bit.
Okay. Sounds good.
So
we'll do that then.
Let's keep that in mind.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, Hammond and Skull have some really great insight on this. They first reference part of Tolkien's letter to Waldman, letter 151, but it's not included in the Carpenter volume, so I can't really say it's 151. It's part that wasn't in there. In it, Tolkien says, I make the perilous and difficult attempt to catch at close quarters the air of timeless elvish enchantment.
Well, and then they make some great observations on how Tolkien executes this attempt. Yeah. They say, wisely he brings the company into Lothlórien by stages, revealing the elvish realm gradually to both his characters and his readers, cushioning the sensation that one has passed into a land that is almost another world. In the process, the company crossed 3 physical barriers. The river Nimrodel, which washes the stain of travel and weariness from Frodo's limbs. The river Silverlode, the crossing of which seems to Frodo like stepping over a bridge of time, and the bridge and gates to Caras Galadhon.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very good point. Each one of those, and of course we'll get to that third one shortly, but
very physical boundaries. I really like that they've brought that up because
it's that liminal stuff again that we talked about.
Exactly, that liminal imagery again, crossing over.
And how closely tied that is with fairy.
Yeah.
So then we get Frodo's sensation of being in a different time. You mentioned that from the Hammond and Skull passage. I love this. Walking in a world that was no more. But boy, it's that comparison with Rivendell that's just brilliant. I love the way Tolkien puts this, that in Rivendell, there was memory of ancient things. That is, we had lore, we have history. Elrond, I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago in the world of, blah. Great stuff. Memory of ancient things. But in Lórien, the ancient things are still here.
It's the difference between hearing from an Elrond or a Glorfindel who was actually there and actually stepping into an ancient world.
Into that world. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that Verlyn Flieger spends a lot of time on Lothlórien in her book, A Question of Time. And one of the things that I always think about when I read this passage again is she points out that this moment is the first indication that Lothlórien is on really sort of a different timeline from the rest of Middle-earth, and that it's apparent as soon as they enter. She says, Frodo is the first to feel it. When he first enters Lórien, it is plain that the quality of his experience changes. And that's what we're getting here with all this sensory imagery.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit about that in our most recent Patreon special. So
yes, we
if
did.
you want to know more, be sure to look at joining a fellowship of the podcast, and you can get all of our postscripts. When did we start doing our postscripts? Season 2, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think only season 1 is that's the only one we didn't do postscripts for.
Yeah.
So my goodness, that goes back a ways. Like
a few years.
Got over 100 postscripts on there, folks.
Yep.
All right.
Pretty amazing.
But yeah, here the ancient still lives, just rich.
And yet, even though they are crossing over, even though there are physical barriers and there is sort of a barrier of time in a way, still evil exists.
Yeah.
Evil is, I'm thinking of from Mythopoeia.
Boy, I am too, yeah.
And evil continues to threaten them. But there's no shadow on Lothlórien itself.
Not yet. Yeah. This is also another little bit of a Beowulf moment. This is the circle of light with all of these things on the outside. The wolves howling on the borders, the world outside filled with things to fear and distrust. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And as you're talking about Beowulf, about the evil that lies in wait outside. And I'm thinking of that line near the end of the Beowulf lecture. Grendel is maddened by the sound of harps.
Well, yeah,
and
that's perfect.
We were just talking about harps.
Yeah, we were.
It's that reminder that the evil it's not only just outside your borders, but it's coming. It's eventually going to come in.
Yes.
Just not yet.
That's correct.
You're keeping it at bay, but
that's all you can
do
do
forever.
And you eventually will succumb at some point. So then we get to Cerin Amroth, and that's where I'm going to go ahead and have you pick up with the marching host of elves. A paragraph later,
the elves go marching 2 by 2.
Ha! Hurrah! Hurrah!
All right. A marching host of elves had come up silently. They were hastening towards the northern borders to guard against any attack from Moria, and they brought news, some of which Haldir reported. The marauding orcs had been waylaid and almost all destroyed. The remnant had fled westward towards the mountains and were being pursued. A strange creature also had been seen, running with bent back and with hands near the ground, like a beast, and yet not of beast shape. It had eluded capture, and they had not shot it, not knowing whether it was good or ill, and it had vanished down the Silverlode southward. Also, said Haldir, they bring me a message from the Lord and Lady of the Galadriel. You are all to walk free, even the dwarf Gimli. It seems that the lady knows who and what is each member of your company. New messages have come from Rivendell, perhaps. He removed the bandage first from Gimli's eyes. Your pardon, he said, bowing low. Look on us now with friendly eyes. Look, and be glad, for you are the first dwarf to behold the trees of the ninth of Lórien since Durin's day.
My goodness. To his credit, he goes to Gimli first. And he addresses him directly for the first time, I think, in the entire chapter. He addresses him.
I think that is the first time he actually speaks to him instead of just speaking about him. And
third person, yeah.
And that's why I was saying, we've been messing with Haldir a bit over the last couple of episodes.
A little bit. We're going to catch a bunch of flack. So we've already recorded the episode that you heard last week. We recorded before it released, of course. So I'm just predicting that sometime between that episode and this one, we're going to catch a
lot of flack because Haldir
it's the same stuff when we beat up on Boromir for a while about, needing a Sherpa and
I appreciate you co-signing the Boromir beatdown because I thought that was pretty much all me, but
it was, but it's our show. I'll take some of it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I was kind of hard on Boromir, and we have been kind of hard on Haldir, and
we have.
And he is kind of a fan favorite, mostly because he's got some pretty solid moments in the movies.
Yeah, he does.
But in the book, he's just not that classy of a guy until this moment,
Right. Yeah.
So
this is a great moment for him.
It is.
Going back to the paragraph we didn't read, we see that they're resting in the evening, even with their eyes covered. So they're, just chilling, lying down and resting with the blindfolds on, which, all right, fair enough. And they slept there. They moved
like
quickly.
Sleeping with one of those masks, like the spa masks.
Like sleeping on an airplane or something like that, with the little mask on. So, they did sleep. Even in the night, they still couldn't take off their blindfolds. And then they went on again in the morning at a leisurely pace. The text says walking without haste.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around lunchtime, around noon, when this host of elves walked by. So
Right.
that's the
Right.
time frame.
Yeah. And then these elves come up and they bring some news. Haldir
Yeah.
shares some of it with the Fellowship.
Mhm.
They learn that the orcs that had been following them had almost been destroyed. The rest are being pursued back westward.
Right.
And we get this report of a strange creature. Who could this
Yeah.
be? Or what could this be? It eluded capture. They didn't shoot it, to their credit, I guess, because they didn't know if it was good or bad.
Which, I mean, that sounds
I
good
don't-
at first, right? You're going to reserve judgment for when you know the circumstances. But
Yeah.
it kind of looks bad when you set it next to their total willingness to kill Gimli if he just wanted to turn around and go home. That's the problem I have.
There is that.
I mean,
And-
I don't know what that strange creature is. He's running near the orcs.
And
but
by
I
the
don't
way,
know
he's
if he's good or
sniffing and
bad.
scrabbling, because that was the description we got in
Right.
the last episode.
Like a
So-
beast, but not of beast shape.
Yeah.
So we're going to hold off from shooting him. But
He's
if
kind of
Gimli,
snarling,
the
he's
dwarf,
hissing a lot, but
Yeah.
he might be all right. I
He
don't
might,
know. We'll let
yeah.
him go.
we'll let him go for now. But if that dwarf turns around and tries to leave, we're going to shoot him. There is a little bit of a double standard there.
And I can only imagine that Legolas is hearing that, saying, "See, we weren't that crazy to let him go."
Yeah. Legolas is always going to try to defend the quote unquote penal system of his father.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and of course, he vanishes down the silver lode, and we'll see him again later. It'll be a while. He does not want to hang out around here. That's for sure.
No, he doesn't want to be anywhere near elves.
No.
And then we get this wonderful message from the Lord and Lady,
Yes.
from Galadriel and Celeborn.
Would have been convenient if it came earlier, but still nice. Yeah.
It would have been nice if it had come earlier, but hey, again, they didn't kill the dwarf, so it worked out.
There you go. There's a plus.
He says, "You're all to walk free. The lady knows you all."
Yeah. And then he speculates about the source of this information. Maybe it was new messages from Rivendell. And
Perhaps.
that's interesting. It could be messages, but now it also makes me think about the possibility of Osanwe, that this might be some sort of direct communication between Elrond and Galadriel at this point. What do you think?
Could be. We don't know for sure. Yeah, it could be. We
Yeah.
know they can both do that. So
Yeah.
And then, as we said, he removes Gimli's blindfold first.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, Haldir. Glad you finally
Good
did the right
job.
thing.
Here's my golf clap.
Come on, I'll
No,
give
he
credit
gets it.
where credit's due.
I
He
do
gets
too.
there. He
Good
gets
job,
there.
Haldir.
Yeah.
All right. And now we get a little bit of the history behind this. Gimli is the first dwarf to see this place since Durin's day. Now, my first thought is that this can't literally mean Durin the Deathless, the first of his name, because he died before the First Age ended, and Lothlórien wasn't even founded until Second Age 1350.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe he means when it was the Sylvan realm of Lothlórien,
Could be.
because
Could be.
I mean, but still, even then, I mean, the lordship of Amdir was in the Second Age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, maybe he means the land itself. I mean, he doesn't say you're the first dwarf to behold the trees of this kingdom. He says of the ninth. Well, but he does say the ninth of Lorien, so he is kind of talking about the kingdom. But maybe just the ninth itself, the land before the elves even ruled it at all. I don't know.
Or it could just be a poetic thing,
Yeah.
a figure of speach.
First
do
dwarf
seem
to
to
see this
use-
place since a really long time ago. Since
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe he's trying to say this in a way that is meaningful to a dwarf
Yeah.
and doesn't
trying to
know his
give you
dwarvish
something.
history that well.
I like that thought. Since Durin's day, yeah. Durin's
Yeah,
day. That
right.
sounds
And
good.
Gimli's like, "K boomer," it's like he's just,
Oh man, ouch.
but still, it's a very nice thought. It's a very strong token of fellowship, and
It
it's
is.
a very nice sign of really peace between these races. And we've seen it. We've seen it start a little bit between Legolas and Gimli. Things got a little hairy a little while ago, and Gimli went for his axe. But it seems like it's getting better.
Yeah. It's a good thing that, it didn't get any worse. It does, to an extent, lend a little more credence to the notion that Haldir really was just following orders. And I mean, we know he was, but it gives him a little bit more, I don't know, maybe a little more leeway, a little more
I know what
grace.
you're saying. It sort of absolves him of
A little bit.
little
A
bit.
little bit. I mean, we compared him to Éomer and the fact that both of them had their rules to follow.
Yeah.
And we gave Éomer a lot more credit because he talked about, this thing that my heart would do this thing, but I'm bound by the law not to do it. And then he changes his mind and says, I'm going to do it anyway. And here's all this extra help. I'm putting my life in your hands. Literally.
Maybe Haldir is just more of a rule follower than Éomer was.
Yeah.
And maybe he recognizes that the rule is really not a good one, certainly not in this case, but he's got to follow it anyway. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
He could at least talk to Gimli directly.
Well, that's true. He could pretend
he's
in
the last episode, he could have actually spoken to him and said, look, dude,
I'm going to blindfold that guy right over there.
Yeah. I mean, he could have said, look, dude, I know this is messed up, but here's the rule.
Right.
Are you okay with this? And then it would have probably been the same thing, but at least he would have talked to Gimli about it directly.
Right. Showed a little more respect.
Yeah. Instead of hey, by the way, we're going to blindfold your dwarf. I'm sure you're okay with that, right? It's
yeah. As we agreed, as we previously agreed.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
My lawyers will see to that.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Well, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to pick up right after that with Frodo's perspective when the blindfold comes off.
All right.
I always like it when the blindfold comes off.
I bet you do.
All right. I had to throw that out there. All right.
Please.
When his eyes were in turn uncovered, Frodo looked up and caught his breath. They were standing in an open space. To the left stood a great mound, covered with a sward of grass as green as springtime in the elder days. Upon it, as a double crown, grew 2 circles of trees. The outer had bark of snowy white and were leafless, but beautiful in their shapely nakedness. The inner were malorn trees of great height, still arrayed in pale gold. High amid the branches of a towering tree that stood in the center of all, there gleamed a white flet. At the feet of the trees, and all about the green hillsides, the grass was studded with small golden flowers shaped like stars. Among them, nodding on slender stalks, were other flowers, white and palest green. They glimmered as a mist amid the rich hue of the grass. Over all the sky was blue, and the sun of afternoon glowed upon the hill and cast long green shadows beneath the trees. "Behold, you are come to Cerin Amroth," said Haldir, "for this is the heart of the ancient realm as it was long ago. And here is the mound of Amroth, where in happier days his high house was built. Here ever bloom the winter flowers and the unfading grass, the yellow Elenor and the pale Nifredil. Here we will stay a while, and come to the city of the Galadriel at dusk." What a scene!
Such a wonderful scene, starting with this gorgeous description of the circle of trees.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
2 circles of trees, outer with bark of snowy white, leafless, but beautiful in their shapely nakedness.
Yeah, let's just leave that alone. Yeah.
Don't Google that phrase anytime soon.
No, please do not. And don't blame us if you do.
No.
The inner were the fully leaved malorn trees, still arrayed in their gold. What a shot this is.
There's all this. I want to talk about this in a little bit, but you see this sort of white and gold color scheme throughout Lothlórien.
Yeah,
there's this constant contrast between the white and the gold. And yeah, so you've got these white trees on the outside, and then the malorn trees with their golden leaves. And then right in the middle of all that, the gleaming white flet.
What a location. And then in the foreground, on the hillside itself, we get those small golden flowers we talked about in the philology fair, the Elenor, as well as the Nifredil. And these are white and pale green flowers, almost glowing, just gorgeous. And then, of course, the blue sky and the long shadows. What a scene this is.
And then Haldir gives a little bit of the history, just kind of reminding us of just how ancient this place really is.
Oh, yeah.
Its name,
Heart of the
Cerin Amroth, actually means Amroth's Mound in Sindarin. And it's named that because that's where his house was in happier days.
In much happier days, before he had that debate and got engaged. Oh, yeah.
You're like Amroth's friend who just thinks he can do better and just keeps on bringing it up every chance you get.
He could have done better.
I mean, hey.
Because, did you end up even marrying her? No, you ended up drowning. So
Hey, her
you
river
definitely could have
heals,
done better.
though. Her river heals, so she must have had a good heart.
I'm still thinking it's just an analgesic. It just numbs you. It's so cold.
It's just so cold.
And more I think about that, the more I think, I feel the healing in my feet. I don't feel the pain anymore. Yeah, that's about right. You don't feel any pain anymore.
And
Give
then
it an hour.
by extension, you just assume that the river is so cold because she was so cold, right?
I hadn't made that connection.
I'm just,
but I love it.
I'm gathering
I
that
hadn't.
Alan
Yeah.
Sisto is not #1 Nimrodel fan.
I don't know. I suppose she's all right.
Beautiful singing voice, though. Beautiful
singing voice for all 30 words. Boom.
Not much of a vocabulary, but she's got a nice voice.
That's right. So yeah, this is the heart of the realm that goes back long, long before, and then we get the naming of Eleanor, which we touched on.
Yeah.
And Nifredil.
Yeah, and we did talk quite a bit about the name of Eleanor earlier. It means sun star.
Yeah.
Nifredil we haven't talked about, but in Parma Elder 17, it is translated as a pale white flower like snowdrop. And it's actually translated as snowdrop in the etymologies, which is in The Lost Road, History of Middle-earth 5. It seems to come from the roots nifred, meaning pallor, and till, meaning point.
Oh, okay. Well, now earlier in Philology Fair, I'd read a little bit from letter 312 to Amy Ronald. Now, Tolkien actually talked about both Eleanor and Nifredil in that letter. And about Nifredil, he said, it would be simply a delicate kin of a snowdrop, and Eleanor a pimpernel, as I read earlier, with sun-golden flowers and star-silver ones on the same plant, and sometimes the two combined.
And working from their knowledge of the two real-life flowers that the professor compares his fictional flowers to, Walter and Graham Judd in Flora of Middle-earth give us a little bit more insight here. Both of these flowers are called winter flowers by Haldir.
Yeah.
And Flora of Middle-earth tells us that snowdrop is called that not only because it's white and it has flowers that hang down. And go ahead and do a Google image search on this flower if you haven't seen it before.
Okay.
But you'll see how the flowers do kind of hang down. Well, not kind of hang down. They totally hang down. But they also grow in the snow of late winter.
Oh, okay.
The Judds say Nifredil differs from our common snowdrop mainly by having a more delicate habit and by its blooming throughout the winter.
Okay.
And while snowdrops and Nifredil flowers would hang down, Eleanor, if it's like pimpernel, would have erect or ascending stems, according to the Judds. So the shape of Eleanor, with it sort of facing upwards, is as much in contrast to Nifredil as the color. You know, one's pointing down, one's pointing up. Everything about this description and right down to these flowers is contrasts.
Yeah.
And
it really
it's
is
pretty powerful stuff. I also noticed while looking through the pages of Flora of Middle-earth that both snowdrops and pimpernels, and again, these are not the same as Nifredil and Eleanor, but Tolkien himself said that they're akin to them.
Right.
Both snowdrops and pimpernels have been used medicinally in the real world. So it could be that, just like we saw with Wordleberry in the beginning of the chapter, right? Back in episode 162, maybe by referencing these medicinal plants, maybe Tolkien is telling us that the travelers have reached a wholesome region. And that's a quote from Flora of Middle-earth.
Maybe. Now, don't forget that, unlike Eleanor, Nifredil appears in the Silmarillion. When Luthien was born in Doriath, we get the white flowers of Nifredil came forth to greet her as stars from the earth.
That's right. So there is a really poignant connection back to the First Age there, isn't there?
Yeah.
And to Celeborn's old hood, really, because he actually came from Doriath.
Yes, he did. That's right.
And in a recent postscript on our Patreon feed, we actually read from Unfinished Tales that Galadriel endeavored to make Lórien a refuge and an island of peace and beauty, a memorial of ancient days. And I think we do see that here. You know, not only with Nifredil, which was this, very important flower from the First Age, but as I was saying a little while ago, just that entire gold and silver color scheme. You've got the Eleanor and the Nifredil, you've got white bark and gold leaves. All of that, to me, I think immediately of the two trees, Lothlórien and Telperion.
Absolutely. Lots of those callbacks to that in this chapter, I think.
Absolutely. Yep. And it also, of course, makes me think of the sun and moon themselves.
Yeah.
And
of course.
Even the Lord and Lady of Lothlórien.
Yeah.
At least their hair, because we'll see they have
their hair,
golden and silver hair. Yeah.
There are so many callbacks to the trees here in Lórien. And that's certainly not an accident, like you pointed out from Unfinished Tales there.
Yeah.
Now, Hammond and Skull point us to letter number 165 to see Tolkien's own reaction to this and the subsequent passages about Cerin Amroth. He says, and I love this, I came eventually, and by slow degrees, to write The Lord of the Rings to satisfy myself. Of course, without success, at any rate not above 75%. But now, when the work is no longer hot, immediate, or so personal, certain features of it, and especially certain places, still move me very powerfully. The heart remains in the description of Cerin Amroth.
Wow.
Yeah. To know that this was one of his favorite places in the book.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's interesting to hear that, of course, we know Tolkien was such a perfectionist.
Yes, he was.
It makes me a little sad, but not too surprised to hear that he was not more than 75% satisfied with Lord of the Rings.
And sometimes I count 75% as success. He just has really a high bar.
Yeah. But the fact that he was not even completely satisfied with his work, and I think a lot of artists feel that way about their work.
I totally get that.
Work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was still moved powerfully by this description, I mean, no wonder it has such an effect on us, because it is so wonderful, Yeah. So
he's a good critic of his own work, and if he had such a high opinion of it, it's not a surprise that we do as well.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say, and you said much more eloquently.
Or at least just with more pith.
There you go.
So
I'm just like, moving, man.
There's a lot of things I like there, man. A lot to unpack.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. It's fascinating.
Good stuff. Just throw out more of our verbal noise, shall we? All right.
Here we go.
I'm going to have you pick up the next couple paragraphs here about kind of the impact that Cerin Amroth has.
Okay. The others cast themselves down upon the fragrant grass, but Frodo stood a while, still lost in wonder. It seemed to him that he had stepped through a high window that looked on a vanished world. A light was upon it for which his language had no name. All that he saw was shapely, but the shapes seemed at once clear-cut, as if they had been first conceived and drawn at the uncovering of his eyes, and ancient as if they had endured forever. He saw no color but those he knew, gold and white and blue and green, but they were fresh and poignant, as if he had at that moment first perceived them, and made for them names new and wonderful. In winter here no heart could mourn for summer or for spring. No blemish or sickness or deformity could be seen in anything that grew upon the earth. On the land of Lórien there was no stain. He turned and saw that Sam was now standing beside him, looking round with a puzzled expression, and rubbing his eyes as if he was not sure that he was awake. "It's sunlight and bright day, right enough," he said. "I thought that elves were all for moon and stars, but this is more elvish than anything I ever heard tell of. I feel as if I was inside a song, if you take my meaning."
Inside a song.
Inside a song.
What a phrase that is. So the others rest, but Frodo, and again we see this through his perspective, stands lost in wonder. And I don't blame him. Look at this description, huh?
Yeah, it's magnificent. I mean, it's really beyond words. I mean, and we really see... Literally, yeah. And this is, we really see Tolkien the linguist at work here.
Boy, we do. Yeah, you're right. We get in some sort of a little bit of a draw from Mythopoeia here about naming things and the power of adjectives. And we get these shapes, these simultaneously new and ancient shapes. I love that.
Yeah.
And then the colors. And this is always a passage that sticks with me. This is one of those ones that you just remember. The idea of these colors being perceived as if for the very first time.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of the idea of recovery, of seeing things the way that we should see them.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And that is straight back to On Fairy Stories. I had the same thing in my notes too, is that Frodo has regained a clear view of things as we are or were meant to see them. Right. And there's another phrase that Tolkien uses in there when he's talking about recovery. He says, freed from the drab blur of triteness or familiarity.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's that seeing something that you've seen a million times before, but seeing it as if for the first time, seeing it just fresh and new in a way, really. Yeah. And I love that Tolkien uses the word poignant here. He says they were fresh and poignant.
Yes.
And when we say the word poignant, we refer to the way something makes you feel. But if you look at the etymology of that word poignant, it actually means sharp. It comes from French. It originally comes from Latin, and it has
Okay.
to do with words that have to do with, pricking or stinging. And it
Okay.
really just means sharp. And so I think you can take poignant more literally too, and just imagine Frodo seeing the world with a sharpness and a crispness that he's not used to seeing it with. And
Yeah.
that's a very powerful image. And it brings me back to what we were talking about a moment ago when you talked about how the Ainur at first had no sight, and
Yeah.
then suddenly Ea was revealed to them in a vision.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a moment of that here too, because when the blindfold is taken off, Frodo's sight is returned to him as well, and he is seeing the world as a brand new vision.
Yeah.
It's not like the Ainur would have seen it, of course.
Well, no.
It's
Well, first of all, it's real and not a vision.
but well, that's true, and it's it's extreme heights of the Ainur to just one lowly hobbit, but still,
Right.
it's kind of a microcosm of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really a beautiful idea that he's seeing
Well, it
everything
is.
so fresh and new, and it's fairy. I mean, it is. There's
Yeah.
nothing else to say about it except that it is
No,
it's just
you're
a
right.
plain fairy enchantment, and
Yeah.
that's what fairy is in Tolkien's world.
Mm.
And as I'm thinking of the Ainur and the idea of everything being new,
Mm-hmm.
so we're talking about the names, and
Right.
isn't it seems like there's a reference to the Garden of Eden there too, and maybe you'll remember this with
Huh.
sort of with Adam naming things for the first time,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
The
And,
power of naming. That's right.
yeah, and I wonder if that's something else that Tolkien is bringing in here, just again to sort of describe everything in this sort of
Making Frodo a new
Edenic.
Adam in a way, because he made for the
Yeah,
names new and wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, and again, not in any major sense,
Well,
but
no.
again, this is sort of an Edenic kind of paradise that he's in here,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe Tolkien
I
is
think so.
referencing all this stuff.
Boy,
I think
yeah.
all of that combines to give us this idea that while Frodo is looking at this land in the fourth millennium, the beginning of the fourth millennium of the Third Age, he's
Mm-hmm.
seeing it almost at the beginning of time, and
Yeah.
it's just
Because it
incredibly
almost
powerful.
exists from the beginning of time. I mean, this is,
Exactly.
like we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, the ancient lives here. This is a time
Yeah.
bubble. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a little TARDIS. It's all timey-wimey and
Timey-wimey. That's awesome. I love it. I'm waiting for Galadriel to say that. It's a little timey-wimey.
yeah. Exactly. But yeah, and because everything is so fresh, so
Yeah.
poignant, so new, and you're seeing everything as if for the first time.
Right.
Even in winter, it says one could not mourn for the other seasons.
Right. That's
I mean,
pretty
because
amazing.
there's nothing lacking here. There's nothing
No,
to be disappointed by here.
that's right. It's still
It is a
perfect.
paradise. There's no
Yeah.
blemish. There's no sickness. There's no deformity. No stain.
Boy, that's a true paradise. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it is as close to perfect, as close to Arda unmarred
Yes.
as you are going to get in this fallen world now.
Boy, that is true. Absolutely correct. Which kind of gives us a little bit of insight into Sam's reaction, right? I mean,
Yeah,
first we see his preconception that Elvish would be more about moon and stars than the sun. And we've talked about that ourselves, right? Every time there are elves, there are stars. But this is
Mhm.
more Elvish. This is that taken to the extreme, so much so that he feels as if he is inside of a song.
Yeah,
Pretty amazing.
and that's another fairy thing, isn't it? I mean, that
Yeah, it
reminds me
is.
of fairy and drama from On Fairy Stories.
Absolutely, where you feel
the
like
idea
you're
of
really in it.
the idea of being in a dream that some other mind is weaving,
Yeah.
and that's what these characters are going through.
Mm.
And of course, Haldir's response is, "Oh, that's just my boss.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah,
great. You'll love
that's
her.
just her. She's pretty cool. You
That's
want
just
to meet her?
Galadriel.
Yeah.
You'll like her. You know
You
who's gonna
will.
love her?
Yeah.
Gimli. You're gonna love her, dude. Just wait till you meet her,
are.
dude.
That's right,
She's
man.
great." I have a feeling all of them just talk about Galadriel like, I like her.
Oh, Galadriel.
She's so
She's
nice.
the best. That
She's
Celeborn's
just
okay
so
too.
cool. Yeah, he's all right.
She has a lot of good things to say about Celeborn when we get to the next chapter and actually meet them.
That's true. She does.
She talks about him being incredibly wise and a great giver of gifts. There's a lot. He's not just arm candy. Let's just put it
It's
that way.
true. It's true. He's not just a trophy husband.
So I'm going to go ahead and pick up right after that, as Haldir has invited them to climb up Cerin Amroth with him.
All right.
But before we climb that hill with Haldir, we're really excited to introduce you to our newest sponsor here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, Little Passports.
Look, folks, you know how things are these days. Schools are closed. Distance learning is the new normal. Alan and I have been looking for ways to make learning fun and interactive for our kids, and we know many of you are doing the same. So that's why we want to introduce you to Little Passports.
Now, I know you've seen subscription boxes for other things, but frankly, nothing like this. You sign up for Little Passports and you get a box delivered to your door every month that contains fun, engaging, really hands-on learning for kids from 3 up. Frankly, right now, it's super helpful.
They're sending us boxes for our kids. And I think I speak for both of us when I say we can't wait to tell you all about them the next time
Definitely.
we talk about this. I'm actually really hoping to get the Science Expeditions pack with experiments in it. I think my kids are going to love that one, especially my son. You actually get to make your own slime.
Oh, yeah. I hope you get that and not me. But I'm really excited about the World Edition one. It takes your kids on a global adventure, one country at a time each month. A lot of fun.
That sounds like so much fun. So, folks, for $12.95 a month, there is a ton of stuff to explore right in your own home with Little Passports.
And just for our listeners, Little Passports is offering 15% off the price of any subscription. Now, that means your child could be flying rockets or looking through a microscope in no time.
You'll want to use offer code PPP at checkout for 15% off your order. That's PPP at littlepassports.com.
And there's also a How Did You Hear About Us question, so there too, please let them know you heard about them from us. They're really a perfect fit for the show. They're passionate about educating kids, teaching them about the world around them, and we think a lot of you are going to enjoy Little Passports.
Absolutely, and we're so excited to be working with them. But now, let's get back to climbing the hill of Cerin Amroth. Alan?
Thank you, Sean. Here we go. They followed him as he stepped lightly up the grass-clad slopes. Though he walked and breathed, and about him living leaves and flowers were stirred by the same cool wind as fanned his face, Frodo felt that he was in a timeless land that did not fade or change or fall into forgetfulness. When he had gone and passed again into the outer world, still Frodo the wanderer from the Shire would walk there, upon the grass, among Elenor and Nifredil in fair Lothlórien. They entered the circle of white trees. As they did so, the south wind blew upon Cerin Amroth and sighed among the branches. Frodo stood still, hearing far off great seas upon beaches that had long ago been washed away, and seabirds crying, whose race had perished from the earth. Haldir had gone on and was now climbing to the high flet. As Frodo prepared to follow him, he laid his hand upon the tree beside the ladder. Never before had he been so suddenly and so keenly aware of the feel and texture of a tree's skin and of the life within it. He felt a delight in wood and the touch of it. Neither as forester nor as carpenter, it was the delight of the living tree itself. Wow.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. I want to touch on that for sure.
We definitely will, yeah. But this just continues. This
Yeah.
sensation, this purity of sensation just continues.
Yeah.
As Haldir invites Frodo and Sam to climb the hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Frodo just has this sensation of being in a timeless land. And this bit of returning there in his mind after
Yeah.
passing into the outer world
Mm.
is powerful.
It is powerful, and it's not even described as in his mind, right?
Yeah.
This is a simile rather than a metaphor, that he would still walk there upon the grass. Well, no, he's not. He's in the Shire. But
Yeah.
in his mind, it's as real as if he were there.
Yeah. It's like this experience is going to stay with him and it's always going to be real.
Yes.
I think
That's a
that's
good
what
way
it's
of
trying
putting
to
it.
say. Yeah.
It's more than just memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something that's more tangible, more interpreted by the senses rather than just a recall. Yeah.
Well, and there's a sense of timelessness to the experience, like you can go back and relive the experience, and that
Right.
brings us back to that idea of that timelessness, doesn't it?
Right. The time bubble, this very real sensation that Frodo's having where he's in a protected place where time just does not move, or at least certainly doesn't move like it does in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we had a chance to really dive into this recently in that Patreon special.
Yeah,
Because,
I did too.
you
That
know,
was
we
great.
did talk about this place and these moments specifically,
Mhm.
because they are really tangible moments of that
Yeah.
time bubble.
Yeah, they really are.
So at the top, they enter the circle of white trees, and with the south wind, Frodo can hear the seas and the cries of seabirds. It's almost like he's taking a trip through space as well as time, because he can hear the sea far off.
A little bit. And it's very far off, folks. I'd have to pull up a map and do some calculations, but this isn't just like 50 miles down the way. We're talking hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to hear the sound of the seas and the seabirds. And he's not hearing them from the mouths of the Anduin. He's hearing seas upon beaches that had long ago been washed away, and he's hearing seabirds that have gone extinct.
Race and perished from the earth. He's hearing the past.
Yes.
He's taking a trip through space and time.
Yeah.
Time and relative dimension in space. It's his TARDIS. I'm sorry. I don't get a chance to make many Doctor Who references on this show.
No, that's true. You don't.
You know,
I know.
We've
talked about this. You don't get to make too many Doctor Who references because I don't.
You don't get to make too many Star Trek references.
Star Trek references. That's right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Which is a
someday
shame.
We'll just have to watch each other's shows and actually get caught up and
start
to make some.
I'd like to talk to you about Tolkien and
your Shatner is still
book.
Really good. I do love your Shatner.
Oh man, so much fun. All right. One of these days I'll do a full-blown reading of Shatner or something like that. That would be hilarious. Maybe on a Tolkien reading day when the world isn't completely upside down.
When we can laugh again.
Remember when I took requests? And there were some funny ones. People wanted to hear, what was the idea? Ungoliant and Treebeard, the Monty Python skit.
Oh, right.
With those two. Yeah. Or, other things. And of course I didn't read those. I ended up reading serious stuff like, Fingolfin challenging Morgoth and things like that. Right. Though I did do the bath song. That was pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That was pretty cool. You did that.
Yeah. But no, I didn't do a Shatner as Tolkien. That would have been interesting.
Next Tolkien reading day.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, when the world is normal again.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks.
That's right. That's right.
And if he doesn't remember to do it, you can remind him.
You might have to, actually, given my
Probably.
Current state of memory. So let's see. So Haldir goes on and Frodo follows, and we get that amazing passage at the end. And I love this. I want to talk about this a little bit. The feel and texture of the tree and its very life. This is the delight of the tree itself. And this is such a Tolkien moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very personal moment.
It's appreciation of nature without thought for what nature can do for you.
Yeah.
Without
this isn't about purpose or function or worth.
Right. It's just pure appreciation of nature for just what it is. Going back to Tolkien Reading Day, that was just a few weeks ago, and that was the theme this year, was nature and industry. And we talked about things like Avaule and Yavanna and the fact that it's okay to cut down trees. We're going to need wood. It's okay to use the natural resources of the world.
Right.
But here is something even purer than that.
Mm-hmm.
It is to feel a delight in the wood just for being wood.
For being a tree. That's right.
Just for being a tree. Not thinking of it as a forester, somebody who can cut this thing down and make money out of it.
Right.
Or as a carpenter.
And not even as a craftsman. Right.
Yeah. Somebody who can take these raw materials and shape them into something beautiful. It's just the tree itself. And it is just a very pure connection with nature that Frodo's feeling for the first time.
Yeah.
Because and we know it's the first time because it says never before that he felt this.
Yeah. Pretty amazing moment. I'm going to have you pick up right after that. This is what I like to call Haldir's guided tour. So if you can read that for us.
And on the left, you'll see the residence of our Lord and Lady.
You can see now kind of pointing with two fingers like they do at Disneyland. Have you ever noticed that? The cast members never point with one finger. They point with two.
Oh, yeah, that's true, huh?
Yeah. Probably just not rude, because then you don't feel like somebody's pointing at you. If their fingers go in your general direction.
That must be it.
Yeah.
I'm sure Haldir worked at Disneyland or Disney World at some point.
He does seem like, some sort of guest relations guy, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he didn't do the Snow White ride.
Probably not. No, they wouldn't let him anywhere near those.
No.
He can't be trusted around dwarves.
No, he cannot. Can you imagine? You go on the Snow White ride and all the dwarves are wearing blindfolds.
Or wearing blindfolds.
Yeah. Ah, man. Yep. All right. I'll let you read.
Frodo looked and saw, still at some distance, a hill of many mighty trees, or a city of green towers, Which it was, he could not tell. Out of it seemed to him that the power and light came that held all the land in sway. He longed suddenly to fly like a bird to rest in the green city. Then he looked eastward and saw all the land of Lórien running down to the pale gleam of Anduin, the great river. He lifted his eyes across the river, and all the light went out, and he was back again in the world he knew. Beyond the river the land appeared flat and empty, formless and vague, until far away it rose again like a wall, dark and drear. The sun that lay on Lothlórien had no power to enlighten the shadow of that distant height. There lies the fastness of southern Mirkwood, said Haldir. It is clad in a forest of dark fir, where the trees strive one against another, and their branches rot and wither. In the midst, upon a stony height, stands Dol Guldur, where long the hidden enemy had his dwelling. We fear that now it is inhabited again, and with power sevenfold. A black cloud lies often over it of late. In this high place you may see the two powers that are opposed one to another, and ever they strive now in thought. But whereas the light perceives the very heart of the darkness, its own secret has not been discovered. Not yet. So,
What?
This vista, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
to the south, is it a hill of trees? Is it a city of green towers? Is it both?
Yeah.
You know? Frodo's not sure exactly what it is.
But
It
it's the
does
source
seem to
of
be
power
the
and
source
light,
of...
right?
Yeah, it does seem to be the source of the power and light that...
So maybe it's a fusion
spring.
reactor?
Yeah. Maybe they got some
That's kinda
solar
what
panels up there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. I don't know that it... Well, I don't know. Fusion
I don't
power.
think they're going to have...
Clean.
I don't think they're going to have nuclear in Lothlórien.
Well, it's not fission. I'm thinking fusion. This is the future. This is both
Yeah.
the past and the future. It's a
Maybe
clean,
so.
risk-free nuclear power.
Yeah. Maybe so. I tend to think solar. I mean, these trees are tall. These trees
the trees
super
are tall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, solar power. There might even be a wind tower that's shaped much like a Malorn tree, sort of like how cell towers are designed to look like.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah. And then to the east, the land runs down to Anduin, and then up to Mirkwood.
And Haldir has some things to say about Mirkwood, right? I mean, he talks
Yeah.
about the striving of the trees and their rot, and then the enemy and Dol Guldur.
That reminds me of the Old Forest a little bit.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
This idea of the corruption in the trees, yeah.
Yeah, which Treebeard will talk about, a little bit in terms of that. But and then the enemy and Dol Guldur, the increase in power there, the sevenfold increase. I wonder if she'll also be avenged sevenfold. But yeah,
I'm vaguely aware that that's the name of a band. I couldn't.
That's all I know too. I couldn't name a song by them. If you paid me $1,000, I wouldn't be able to.
Sevenfold is an oddly specific number to put on the degree to which Dol Guldur seems to be increasing in power, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it might just be a way of saying a lot.
Maybe so. That's probably it.
With power,
Has Haldir done the calculations and I've been working on this all day.
It's been putting out X number of kilowatt hours, and its rate of increase at 3.4% per 24-hour period indicates that currently the power is sevenfold over what it was.
Right, exactly. No, I think
it's just a way of saying a lot. It's poetic.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then we get this wonderfully striking contrast between the darkness of Dol Guldur and the light of Lothlórien, and them striving against one another in thought.
Yes.
And you really just see the light and the dark again, and I love that Haldir says, the light perceives the very heart of the darkness. The light can see the darkness. The light can see
can
what
pierce
the dark is
shadow.
Mm-hmm.
You can shine a flashlight into the darkest shadow.
Right.
But
the light is safe from the darkness, at least for now.
Right.
Its secret has not been discovered, not yet.
And again, you get that circle of light imagery, don't you? You get
that circle of light imagery that Grendel is maddened by the sound of harps. It is coming.
We owe Verlin Flieger, don't we? I mean, how many times have we referenced Beowulf now since she taught us really how important it was? And
we really do. It has
mind-blowingly.
It has increased the amount of meaning we get out of this text so much, and I love it.
So much. I really do. I agree. Well, I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the chapter here, the last couple of paragraphs. This is Aragorn's moment, and I'm really looking forward to reading this.
Mm-hmm.
At the hill's foot, Frodo found Aragorn, standing still and silent as a tree. but in his hand was a small golden bloom of Eleanor, and a light was in his eyes. He was wrapped in some fair memory, and as Frodo looked at him, he knew that he beheld things as they once had been in this same place. For the grim years were removed from the face of Aragorn, and he seemed clothed in white, a young lord, tall and fair, and he spoke words in the Elvish tongue to one whom Frodo could not see. Arwen Vanamelda Namarie, he said, and then he drew a breath, and returning out of his thought, he looked at Frodo and smiled. Here is the heart of elvendom on earth, he said, and here my heart dwells ever, unless there be a light beyond the dark roads that we still must tread, you and I. Come with me. And taking Frodo's hand in his, he left the hill of Cerin Amroth, and came there never again as living man.
Yeah, so Frodo finds Aragorn at the base of the hill, and we get another bit of time travel here, really. I mean,
do, yeah.
You know, we see Aragorn in some fair memory, holding this bloom of Eleanor, and we will get to that fair memory very soon.
We will, of course. But that time travel thing continues because Frodo's seeing Aragorn as he was. The years are removed. He's clothed in white. I mean, this is young Aragorn again.
Yeah, he appears as a young lord, tall and fair.
Yeah.
And he says this phrase in Elvish, Arwen Vanamelda Namarie. And I
That's
think
so beautiful.
It
Just
is
those three words, and it's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's Quenya, and Quenya is always so gorgeous. And
isn't it?
And I think most Tolkien fans recognize Arwen's name, obviously.
Well, yeah, Arwen.
And the Quenya word Namarie, which means farewell.
Yes.
So what about this word in the middle, Vanamelda? Well, in Parma Eldalamron
No. You're not going to reference Parma Eldalamron 17 again.
We got the Parma Eldalamron 17 hat trick in this episode.
Seriously. All right, go ahead. So in that...
there's actually about a page, maybe even a little more, of explanations of this word.
Okay.
So the meaning is clear, and I'll get to the meaning in a moment.
Sure.
But the exact literal translation of Vanimelda is a little bit murky. Now, Vanima, which is the root of that, means fair or beautiful. And that's actually related to the name of the Vanyar, which are also called the Fair Elves.
Of course.
So that makes sense, right?
The OMG Manway guys.
Yeah, that's right. OMG Manway. Yeah, those guys.
Yeah, right.
Now, here's where it gets interesting, because in the first edition of Lord of the Rings, this word was actually printed not as Vanimelda, but as Vanimalda. So it was ALDA.
Right.
Now, in Parma Eldalamron 17, Vanimalda from the first edition is translated as a superlative, just simply meaning most beautiful. But starting with the second edition of Lord of the Rings, this word was printed as Vanimelda with an E, which is what we see here. And that is also translated in that same issue of Parma Eldalamron, and it's translated as beautiful and beloved or elven fair. And if it's elven fair, it may actually be Vanima Elda. Elda as in Eldar.
Right.
So there's a couple of different ways that Tolkien was going with the literal meaning of that word. But regardless of any of that, I think we can all agree that the real meaning of it is very beautiful and beloved, and also an elf. Arwen, farewell. That's what he's saying here. Very beautiful Arwen, farewell.
Beautiful stuff.
Yep.
Now, another point that we discussed in our recent Patreon special, this is one of those moments that Flieger talks about when she says, the present finds itself inhabiting the past. And she references this directly by saying that Frodo sees Aragorn standing on the mound of Cerin Amroth and knows that Aragorn is seeing things not as they are, but as they once were.
And Flieger also says that this is one of two episodes in Lórien, and we'll get to the other one soon, that emphasizes in its own way the motif so central to Tolkien's thought of the interpenetration and interdependence of all aspects of time.
She has such a way of putting things, doesn't she?
She has an amazing way with words, I know. I always feel so smart just from reading her stuff, and she puts it so beautifully. It's like, it's very intellectual and yet so approachable because you just
Such
dive
an
into the
economy of
prose.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. So Aragorn turns and smiles. I love this moment. You know, I mean, he's experiencing some real joy here. He's experiencing this, like we talked about, not as a memory. Aragorn's seeing this. He's seeing things not as they are, but as they once were. He's seeing the past. And And so, of course, he's just filled with joy. I mean, and sorrow. He misses Arwen terribly, but he turns
Of
and
course.
smiles at Frodo. And I
Mhm.
love this statement about his heart dwelling here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. With the observation that there's hope if there's light
yeah,
beyond the dark road,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And then we get this bit of foreshadowing, which we'll take a look
Right.
at in just a moment here, where he left the hill and never came back.
Yeah. As mortal man. I mean, a zombie, maybe. Sorry. That was a terrible joke in the intro. I apologize for that one, but
Again, I think you've been hanging around me too long with the zombie jokes.
probably,
It's just,
probably.
yeah. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at
Yeah.
Aragorn's future? We've got some stuff here, actually, his past and future.
Right.
We've got some stuff here from Appendix A, Section 1, Roman numeral,
Paragraph
lowercase v.
5, right. Subsection 5,
Yeah.
paragraph
There you go,
13.
Yeah. This is the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. Everybody knows where it is in Appendix A.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in that appendix, in the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, we see how Aragorn fell in love with Arwen as a young man. We see how he
That
had
would be
that
Aragorn as a
conversation.
young man, not Arwen as a young man. I just want to be clear.
No,
He didn't fall
she
in
was
love
not a
with
young
Arwen
man.
as a young man, because Arwen has never been a young man.
Right. No, she was not a young man. She wasn't even a young woman, really, at that time.
No,
but
she was
looked it.
a couple thousand years old, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He's not a cradle robber. He's a grave robber.
Quite, yeah. So he falls in love with her. He has this conversation with Elrond about how,
Right.
hey, I really want to marry your daughter, sir. And
well,
Elrond's like, you got to earn it.
Yeah, you got to be the king of both Arnor and Gondor, man.
Yeah, not for less.
Not for less. You think being the king of Gondor and Arnor is hard. Did you ever hear about Beren? Yeah, he had to get a Silmaril. I'm not making your job that hard.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm making it a little easier for you.
Yeah, this is actually achievable without, losing.
We talked about that before,
body.
like how Elrond is not intentionally sending Aragorn to his death.
No, he is
Thingol.
not. No, he is not Thingol here. He's like, all right, I'm not going to do it for nothing. You got to do this, but this is achievable, right? So we get the years of labor against Sauron as he does start to work towards that goal, and then the return to Lórien and Arwen's love for him, because she didn't feel that way at first, and that's where I'm going to pick up right here from Appendix A, Section 1, Subsection 5, Paragraph 13.2. Sorry, I made that last part up. Then for a season they wandered together in the glades of Lothlórien until it was time for him to depart. And on the evening of midsummer, Aragorn, Arathorn's son, and Arwen, daughter of Elrond, went to the fair hill, Cerin Amroth, in the midst of the land, and they walked unshod on the undying grass, with Elenor and Nifredil about their feet. And there upon that hill they looked east to the shadow, and west to the twilight, and they plighted their troth, and were glad. Notice I will say that they did not debate and then plighted their troth. I just want to point that out.
That's how you know it's real.
Of nothing.
That's how you know it's meant to be.
That's right. No debate. No debate.
Yeah. And it certainly was meant to be, because as Aragorn lay dying many years later, they thought back to that moment together.
That's right. They did.
And I'll read again from the appendix. Lady Endomiel, said Aragorn, the hour is indeed hard, yet it was made even in that day when we met under the white birches in the garden of Elrond, where none now walk. And on the hill of Cerin Amroth, when we forsook both the shadow and the twilight, this doom we accepted.
Yeah, looking right back at this exact moment. And then after his death, Arwen returns to Lórien, which, like Rivendell, is now abandoned. And there at last, when the Malorn leaves were falling, but spring had not yet come, she laid herself to rest upon Cerin Amroth. And there is her green grave until the world is changed, and all the days of her life are utterly forgotten by men that come after, and Elenor and Nifredil bloom no more east of the sea. And that paragraph makes me want to cry. The days of her life are utterly forgotten by men that come after.
Yeah.
It's all so far in the past that nobody even remembers this.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah. It is. It's a beautiful moment, and that is just a very poignant in the more traditional sense.
That's the word I was thinking of too. Yeah, I agree.
Very poignant passage, and I think what I love so much about that passage in that appendix is it really is the end of Lord of the Rings.
It is. That is the conclusion of the story.
That is truly the conclusion of the story. And I mean, obviously, ancient past of our world and all that good stuff. So the story is still going on, but that's where that's where the timeline of this book ends, and it is kind of such a final moment, but such a
Yeah, it
beautiful
really
moment.
is.
And I love that we get this point right here in this chapter where Aragorn is standing on the hill where he became engaged to Arwen, and we see him again. We're kind of looking at this as sort of a time travel story timeline. We see him right in the middle of his timeline, looking backward to when they actually got engaged.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm American. I can't say plighted their troth.
Plighted their troth.
When they got engaged. And we also can, as readers who've read this before, we can also look ahead to where that story ends. And it is just such a beautiful and powerful moment.
Yeah,
and we're
really
right here
is.
in the middle of it.
Such a moment. I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to getting to the appendix. I know we've talked about that story a number of times and a number of occasions, and we'll talk about it again, of course, when they do come together at the end of the Return of the King. But when we actually get to the appendices and get to dig into that story, that's going to be a moment. Boy,
it is. It really is.
Well, folks, I know Aragorn was concerned, but I want to reassure you that there is a light beyond the dark roads that we still must tread, you and I. After all, we have Bartleman's Bag coming your way in just a minute. And even when that's done, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode. You'll also find updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And now we have another common room over on Reddit. You can find great discussions there at r/prancingponypod. And as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @prancingponypod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And please, if you like us, consider sharing us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, anywhere you can find Tolkien fans.
And at the risk of repeating myself, if you really want to let the world know
Which
your
we
feelings
do
about
every
us,
week, Sean.
every single week. If you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, and especially if they're good feelings, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is, which helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans we've built together. And that is just so important right now.
Boy, you're not kidding. Right now, community is amazing. For those of you listening to this in the distant future, we're in the middle of the outbreak of the coronavirus.
Very end of March right now.
Yeah, the very end of March. And, a lot of countries are approaching the top of the curve, and we're seeing a lot of people losing that battle. And we're seeing, whole nations under lockdown and people having to stay in their homes. And, we don't often talk about current events, but, this is huge.
It is. And I think, it's just really, I think it's been really very special for both Alan and I think a lot of others in the community out there as well, just to have that virtual community.
Absolutely.
Because when you can't leave your house, when you can't see, when
you're face-to-face friends and your work colleagues and your neighbors, and you can't interact with them. Right. I'll tell you, our Tolkien community has been a great source of comfort and encouragement during these times.
Exactly. And our online community, you are friends.
Yes, you are.
And so it's just been so great. I'm glad that we've got that community there.
I agree. It's great. Tolkien Reading Day, we were able to do some live events, and people really were encouraged by that. Yeah. And I'm glad that we could do things that helped them. But I have to say, they've helped us a lot.
They really have.
You all, as our listeners,
you all are bringing us recovery and escape and consolation as well. It's not
during some very difficult times.
This is not a one-way road.
No, thank you. So, folks, if you would like access to exclusive content like the postscripts, quarterly specials, and honestly, some of the Discord stuff that we do, the Discord Hangouts and the live Discord episodes that are just so much fun and another great source of community, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. Now, I think it's time to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us tonight. Sean.
All right. So back in episode 154, we talked about Sam and his reaction to having to say goodbye to Bill the Pony. Remember, this was back before the fellowship entered Moria. And we talked about it as a very innocent moment, a very emotional reaction for Sam to have. I think I even asked whether it was an overly emotional moment. Not that I thought it was, but I just thought it would be, worth discussing.
Sure.
We talked about whether it was maybe a childlike or even childish in a way to deal with his emotions over saying goodbye to Bill. Well, we had that discussion again, episode 154. And after listening to that, a listener named Jillian wrote to us with some further thoughts on that. She said, While listening to the discussion about Sam's feelings about Bill, I began to think about his poor treatment of Gollum later on in the story. Of course, Gollum is not trustworthy, but Sam shows immaturity by calling him names and openly loathing his presence. The worst of this mistreatment is in the chapter The Stairs of Cirith Ungol, where we see a glimpse of Gollum looking like an old weary hobbit. But Sam gets startled out of sleep, accuses him of sneaking, and calls him a villain. For a brief moment, a door of repentance is opened to Gollum, and Sam is the one to slam it shut. Not that Gollum would have taken it, Gillian says, but it's heartbreaking nonetheless.
Yeah.
When put in contrast with his tenderness for Bill, it shows that Sam has the incomplete moral character of a child. He is childlike with Bill and childish with Gollum, and he's old enough to know that a person or hobbit should be shown more respect than a pony.
True.
I don't think his tenderness for Bill is inappropriate, and I don't mean to pick on Sam, she says. He is actually my favorite hobbit. But comparing these two relationships sheds a little light onto his character and flaws.
Boy.
Some really interesting thoughts there, Gillian. Thank you. Alan, what say you?
Well, I have to say she makes a really good point. Sam shows both childlikeness, which can be, at least to an extent, a sort of endearing quality. Maybe not an admirable one, but one that we're drawn to. But he does also show childishness, that immaturity, that lack of wisdom. And I've noticed, and I think we'll notice a lot more as we move forward, that he has a tendency to view the world in a very binary way, sort of the way a child does. Everybody's either a good guy or a bad guy. He doesn't see those shades of gray very clearly.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's an important distinction between childlike and childish. And if there's anybody out there who's maybe not a native English speaker and maybe, doesn't quite grasp the nuances between those two words, childlike is usually, like you said, kind of more of an endearing quality. Not always, not necessarily in all cases, but it can be sort of an innocence, kind of a purity and just sort of a simplicity, which I think Sam does show. But childishness, to be childish, is usually a negative thing. It's usually immature, a lack of wisdom, like you said. So yeah, I do think that's an important distinction. And I do see how Sam's treatment of Gollum can be viewed as childish.
Yeah.
We'll certainly spend some time dissecting it when we get there.
Yeah.
But although there is a lot of good intention there, I mean, a lot of it is coming from Sam just being protective of Frodo. He knows that Frodo is kind of losing it, and he's trying to be the responsible one. So there is a lot of good intention there in the way Sam acts in books 4 and 6. But there's also just a little bit of plain jealousy there. And,
no doubt.
And as we've hinted a few times, and as Gillian says, Sam's treatment of Gollum, particularly at that moment, it really does close the door on any redemption that Gollum might have had.
Tolkien talks about that in his letters. I don't remember exactly where, and maybe I'll pull that up for the postscript, but he talks about Sam and how there was this moment and Sam sort of ruined it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, because I am also a Sam fan and I want to be kind to Sam, I want to see Sam in the best possible light, I guess I try to think of it as just sort of being more emotionally immature as opposed to childish. I don't know, maybe I'm being too kind to him. But I do think that emotionally immature kind of covers the full range from sort of his touching goodbye to Bill to his really horrible treatment of Gollum. And like Gillian, I'm not disrespecting Sam at all here. I'm a huge fan of Sam.
Yeah.
But I think part of being the emotional core of the Fellowship, which we talked about back in that episode, part of being that emotional core is that he's going to show lots of emotions. And I do think that this story is kind of a growing up story for Sam in a way, because the Sam we see at the end, which conveniently enough we talked about earlier in Philology Fair,
right?
The Sam we see at the end is a wiser and a much more emotionally controlled Sam, and I see much more. I think we see him get there in this book. So there is definitely some immaturity there, and I think he is maturing over the course of the story. So
agreed.
Really cool thoughts, Gillian. Thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Please be sure to join us again next week when we are joined by a very special guest who seems to be keen on maintaining his record as the most frequently occurring guest on the Prancing Pony Podcast.
That's right. John Garth will be joining us again next week to discuss his soon-to-be-released book, The Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien.
I have really enjoyed that book. I mean, a lot. I can't wait. My order is already made, and I'm waiting for it to come out on release day. And I know you all will as well. Well, folks, as always, we want to thank each of you for listening, and we also want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier: to May in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, Ella in California, Joseph in Texas, and Kathy from North Carolina. Thank you all so very much.
Make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, the words you speak to one that nobody else can see, to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barliman's not even returning our calls anymore when we ask him
No.
why he won't be punctual with the mail.
No.
But we'll get back to you as soon as we can, we promise. And your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
That's right. Well, folks, as always, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
Farewell, friends.